Any advice you'd give to an up and coming producer in Canada?
Follow your passion, your interest about a story, go from there. Definitely make a short film. As a producer, go produce a short film and see if you actually like it.
Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kabatov and Anthony Yap, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made on your own terms.
Let's dive in.
All right, welcome back to Off the Lot. Today's guest is Matthew Cervi. He is a Vancouver-based producer and the founder of Mad Samurai Productions, a company that he launched in 2006, focused on genre-driven storytelling in Canada. A graduate of USC's film school and alum of the Canadian Film Centre's Producers Lab, Cervi began his career in Los Angeles, working with companies including Valhalla Motion Pictures, which makes The Walking Dead and The Terminator, and Lighthouse Productions, which made Mimic and The Sting, before returning to Vancouver. His feature producing credits include The Colony, which starred Lawrence Fishburne and Bill Paxton, Cruel and Unusual with Richard Harmon and Michael Eklund, and Juggernaut, starring Jack Kesey and Amanda Crew. Most recently, he produced The Island Between Tides, starring Donald Logue, Adam Beach, and David Mazouz. Cervi has also executive produced films with Paramount Pictures and serves as executive producer on Remnant, a Genie and Leo Award winner. He is a regular presence at major international film markets. Matt, welcome to the program. I also, for transparency, you and I went to high school together. So
let's not age ourselves, Anthony. My God. Yes, we did. Yeah, we went to high school together. So we've known each other for a long time. And was about 10 years ago, we ran into each other at the dentist.
Yeah, it was
in Kerrisdale, and suddenly you're like, "What are you doing?" Like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I work in the film industry." You're like, "I work in the industry too." And it was just a fateful meeting that we realized that we worked in the same industry. We didn't realize it.
Yeah, and then we were connected. I think when I was working on a Hallmark movie with Donald Munro, who connected us up to put us in touch to make Island Between Tides. I think that's how that all came about.
Yeah, 6 degrees of separation. I've known Donald for a long time, and you guys were working together on a few projects. So, yeah, and then you joined Island Between Tides, which is great.
It was a very fun adventure into Prince Rupert.
Yeah, fun adventure is a great way to put it. How about that? That's a wonderful way. It was a very adventurous shoot.
It was very adventurous.
Yeah.
So, what got you into the film industry? How did you find yourself in this?
Dating myself, going back after high school. I always loved film when I was a kid. Always loved watching the films and going to the movies. And there was a moment then where it's, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Or when you grow up, it's like, oh, I want to be like Steven Spielberg, or I want to be like Martin Scorsese or something like that. But, I had the opportunity to go down to California and go to college. I actually started out, I didn't go right directly to USC. I spent a couple years in college here and really, felt like I really wanted to go to film school, and kind of looked up. I remember researching what's the best film school in the world, and USC came up, and I'm like, okay, how the hell do I get to USC? And I went down, spent a year in college before USC, got really good grades, kind of like took a year one over again, and was able to actually transfer to USC. But I remember, I had applied to different film schools around the US, and USC wasn't the only one, but I remember getting a letter in the mail, and it was like one of the best days of my life. Like, you were accepted. And then transferred over there and spent, the rest of my college career at USC Film.
Yeah. What did you pick up there or learn there that you feel really helped you in your career here today? Because obviously you didn't go into directing, right? Like, you didn't go into what we call hors d'oeuvre.
I think it's different now. The film school nowadays, I think it's like George Lucas gave them like tons of money, and I kind of wish I was there now. I went down recently and walked around, and they have all these new facilities and new buildings, and it's all super fancy. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And this was not like this here when I was down there. But they had 3 divisions in film back in the 90s. They had production, film writing and critical studies. And I was actually in critical studies. I couldn't get into production. I didn't get into production. You still do production and you still do writing, but critical studies was more about, critically reviewing movies and film theory and all that sort of stuff. But the biggest thing for me was actually the internships. They had a great internship program there, and I actually interned for Valhalla Motion Pictures. Back then, it was called Pacific Western Productions. They produced the Terminator and stuff, and they transitioned into what's now Gail Unheard is the producer, called Valhalla, and I interned there in the last couple of years in film school, and that was the best experience, being down there, being on. They were on the Paramount lot and just running around and just all soaking in all that experience with a company that had like a first look deal with Paramount was like a huge thing. So that was like the biggest thing for me.
Now, at that age, was that where you kind of like built a lot of your network that you have today then?
No, I didn't build it. I mean, I built a slight network, but not the network that I have today. I think when I moved back to Vancouver for various reasons, that I went to the CFC a few years later, that was the beginning of me building the connections and the relationships that I have today was actually through the CFC, Canadian Film Center, when I went to the producers lab, which I sort of deem like that's the Canadian version of going to USC in Canada, trying to learn how to be a creative producer, filmmaker in Canada and sort of navigating all that world. I felt like the CFC was like the best place for me to go. And because all the distributors are in Toronto, all the, a lot of the decision makers were all there. And I was, in Vancouver, and I was working for a company, and we were doing a lot of sort of like lower budget E-movie kind of genre films. And I really wanted to try and go out on my own. And I felt like I needed to make those connections and make those relationships. And so that's where it all came about when I went to the CFC, actually.
Oh, okay, great. Cool. And you've said that, your company or your main focus on this idea of genre driven, or I guess smart genre driven storytelling. What does that exactly mean for you?
I mean, I guess for good or for bad, I've always wanted to produce movies that I want to watch. And I'm just a genre person. So I've always tried to focus on finding scripts that are really good genre scripts and, and putting my time and effort into those kind of projects. I've never really been interested in producing anything where it's like, it's not a movie that I would actually pay money to go to the theater and want to watch and put my time into. It's just not my thing. So creatively, it's very inspiring and it's very rewarding. Financially, it's not quite as much rewarding on that front.
Why is it not that rewarding? Like you would think that genre films, especially like the kind of stuff you're getting to, like more sci-fi kind of stuff, but then also a little bit of horror.
I mean, I think it's just more in the independent film world. Being an independent film producer is very difficult. And I'm thinking more in the terms of like, servicing, being a service producer, which is quite prevalent in Vancouver. It's a very service-oriented industry here. And servicing MOWs or servicing independent features from LA or something like that, and being like more like a line producer service company can be more financially lucrative. But obviously, you're working on shows that you may or may not creatively be interested in. And I just made a choice many years ago to sort of just focus on like LA style feature film producing, option a project, option a script that you love, and try and independently get it made somehow. Maybe it needs development, maybe it needs more rewrites, and just focus on that. And that's sort of what I've always been doing for my career.
Cool. And at what stage do you like to be involved in? Like, does someone just like a writer or a director or something like that? Do they come and approach you and say, "Here, I have a story, I have an idea," and is that kind of what starts the conversation, or do you like to take things a little bit later in the development stage?
I mean, it depends on the project. There's not many, in the beginning when I first started out, I consumed lots of scripts and tried to read lots of stuff. And a lot of it wasn't very good. That's just the way it is. And I didn't really connect with it. And then there was obviously sort of like a a great script here after reading 25 scripts or whatever. And it just depends on the project. I mean, sometimes they were projects that were like The Colony. The Colony was pitched to me at breakfast at the Toronto Film Festival many, many years ago from a couple of writers, Pascal and Patrick, who went to the CFC after me. And they just pitched me an idea. And I remember thinking this was so cool. Like, oh, this is so awesome. I'm in. Like, I want to develop this. And they hadn't even written anything yet. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll write the first draft and then we'll go from there. So that started out from just a pitch, like just a concept that I connected with. And other scripts have come to me where I thought that they were really good, multiple drafts in. And they were sort of very late stage development. There's always something that needs to be done. There's always notes for something. But sometimes, like The Island Between Tides came to me, Andy and Austin had, the writer, director, producers, had developed it thoroughly before. I knew them from another project before, and they came to me in a later stage. So it all just depends on the project.
I'd seen some stuff where you had already, but well before I became involved with Islands, you had gone on, location scouts with them and done a couple of trips up to Prince Rupert where we eventually filmed with them already. So that feels like it was well before the financing was even in place.
Yeah, I mean, they put a lot of time and effort into it on their own and did tons of pre-production and development and on their own before even I got involved in it. So it depends. I mean, nowadays, I don't necessarily, as I get older, I guess, I'm not really as enthusiastic about trying to get involved in something at really early stages. It just, because there's lots of projects where they were my idea. I'm like, oh, I got a great idea. And I bring in a writer to write it. And in the end, I don't even like the script, and then I just let it go. You put tons of time and effort into it, and you don't know if you're going to even like it or not. I don't do that anymore. I try not to do that anymore. If I'm going to get involved and put my time into something, it's definitely got to be something that's already written where the feature script I got to connect with.
Right.
Even if it needs another polish or another draft or two, that's fine. But something really early stages, at this point in my career, I don't try and get involved in it. If I like it, I'll be like, okay, fine, go write it, and I wish you the best. And when you've done 2 or 3 drafts with development, maybe let me know, come back to me, and I'll read it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And for you, because obviously you're very focused on the producing side of things, like you're not directing, you're even saying if you have an idea, you get a writer to write the script. So what's the lane that you're looking at in terms of what you both bring to the table on it, but also what you you can do to get a project off the ground and into production? Because obviously there's a lot of stuff that happens between an idea for a script and a finished film.
Yeah, I mean, getting a project off the ground is difficult enough. There's no, I mean, you've been there. It's the independent film world is just very difficult to get projects made. I mean, I don't, just based on my thoughts and experience, I'm like, if I have 10 projects in development as an independent producer, if one gets made out of the 10 for the year, that's a good track record. So it's just it's a very difficult thing, which is, as I get older and as I made a few movies now, I've actually started executive producing, which, I executive produce Remnant. So I've sort of been, which I never did before, my experience, the relationships that I have with sales agents or distributors or whatever, even just the business affairs and the paperwork and the financing and the contracts. And until you've gone through it, it's like you just don't know what you're getting involved in, right? So I've been, I'm involved with a few projects now where I'm more executive producing them and I'm not the lead main producer that's sort of pushing it forward. That sort of, I have a few still that I'm working on, but I've been sort of leaning more towards EPing the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
As I sort of get more into the career and where it's going from here. So
So what do you see as the main difference between the producing and executive producing roles, other than financing, I guess?
Well, I mean, as a producer, there's a term that maybe a lot of people don't know of is like you're at risk. So, as a producer on an independent movie, you own the company that owns the copyright. You're at risk for that movie. It's a one-off film. I always look at like independent filmmaking is every film is a startup company.
Hmm.
It's which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's like that's what it is. Um, just because you have success with one film, the next one is like you got to start all over again. There's exceptions to the rule with companies that have a lot more capital and stuff like that, but you know, normally it's like it's a startup film and you're at risk. So you go and you make the you raise the money. Let's say it's $10 million budget. You go over $1 million over budget. Where is that going to come from? You're at risk. You got to come up with $1 million. It's not a studio film where it's like, we're going to go over budget 25 million. Then we're going to go do reshoots on Marvel, Avengers or whatever. They just pay for it all. But if you're an independent filmmaker, producer, you're at risk. You could get sued. Something happens on set that's not necessarily your fault. You know, just some accident or what. Like you have production insurance, but you're just at risk for it. With the financing, if you have private equity, it's like you're responsible for that and to do whatever you can to try and get that back for people, which is why it's difficult to get private equity. But you're at risk for that film in essence. And then as an executive producer, you're not unless you somehow you're part owner of the company that owns the copyright. You're not really at risk. You're more sort of consulting, helping them navigate. Bringing some financing, bringing sales, distributor. You have a relationship with cast or something. You're doing something to help the actual producer bring it across the finish line. A key difference. So.
And it gives you kind of that, like you said, that a little bit of that peace of mind of like, okay, well, it's a project you're helping, but you don't own it. You are making yourself reputationally responsible for the success of the film, but not financially or legally responsible for the
Yeah,
success of them.
yeah, exactly. So, I love being the lead producer on stuff, but also it can be very stressful, and knocks a few years off your life. I kind of joke about that sometimes. But in the end, it's like you have a product. You finish that movie. It's like you're like the main producer in that movie. It's something to like, be very proud of if you can get through that. It's a war. You kind of like go into war with it.
Yeah.
No matter what budget level it is, right? So it's there's definitely a lot of pride that goes with that and a lot of accomplishment, but it comes with the risk of that from a sense. So
Aside from the, stage of development or the quality of the script, you're saying like basically you're choosing stories to shepherd because it's a movie you think you'd like to see. And basically that's kind of your North Star of how you're getting involved.
yeah, I mean that's how I've always sort of navigated what I want to get involved in and not get involved in. Unfortunately, I feel like my creative sensibilities don't really mend well with a lot of the Canadian value fund movies in Canada. They're not necessarily, supporting a lot of genre projects that I love, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in. So there's always a bit of that you always have to bump up against when you're trying to push those movies forward and go into the funding bodies and stuff like that. So that's been a bit of a struggle for a number of years.
I mean, you and I probably both, I'm sure probably more than I have read lots of, Canadian scripts that are in the genre or in genre. Why do they have such a struggle other than telefilm? Because the US doesn't have telefilm. The US has basically just independent films are privately financed. Why isn't that kind of system as easy up here?
I mean, I don't think that independent films in the US are easy to finance either. I think you still have the same issues. You just don't have the studios and the streamers that you have there that you have here. But an independent movie in the States is probably you're dealing with the same issues in a sense that you're dealing with here. I just feel like that sort of the funding and the private money that is that sort of holy grail. If you can somehow get that, it's more available down there. I think that people that, in my opinion, those that are interested in dipping their toe into investing in a movie, they gravitate towards Hollywood because it's Hollywood, right? They don't really gravitate towards a Canadian film in a sense. It's Hollywood is Hollywood. So if somebody's got $1 million, unless they are in Canada, you know, more often than not, they're found down there. So it's just the way it is. But up here, somebody once told me that used to work for one of the funders. Those genre films, the market should finance them. It was sent to me many years ago, and I just thought I just disagree with it whatsoever. The market's not going to like fully finance a horror movie, and that's why. But in my opinion, there's not enough money in the system to fund what everybody wants. It's oversubscribed, and so I understand that they have to make those choices about what they're going to fund. It's difficult. There's not enough money to go around, and everybody wants it. They kind of have to choose that there's an artistic side of the thing about for Canadian content and trying to find that success and what is deemed success. And so I guess films that get into film festivals and travel, that's a certain type of success. And there are lots of genre movies being made all over the world. So you're obviously competing against that as well. So I think that sort of certain priorities might not necessarily be the same as the kind of movies that I love to watch and that I'm
Right.
interested
But you've made those kind of like Juggernaut and The Colony and those are kind of movies would you call those Canadian movies or would you?
Well, they're all Canadian. I mean, everything I've done except for one is a Canadian movie. I mean, Colony was definitely a genre movie. And that one was very. I think it would be impossible to try and make that movie nowadays than it did back then. But Juggernaut was more of a slow burn. It was actually more of a slow burn drama. That the script had a lot more genre elements, but just we just couldn't make the movie on the page that we wanted to, unfortunately, because of financing problems and issues that sort of happened the last minute. We had to make adjustments. It's a beautiful movie, but it's definitely more of a drama. Did really well in the festivals. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's also why I'm kind of like interested more in executive producing as I move forward. Trying to help up and coming filmmakers and sort of navigate the waters and help them sort of cross that finish line, so to speak, on their films.
Yeah, like you said, like Americans have the same problem financing independent films. But seems like there is more of that opportunity. Maybe it's just that because of the sheer number of people down there and the ability for wealth to accumulate, that people just have that, or people approach people who have disposable income or disposable investment capital that they can throw into an independent film. Whereas up here, maybe that's not as prevalent. But also, would you say that the quality of the films that we're making up here are equal to, or is there something missing from our films that needs to be addressed?
I mean, it's a tough question. I think that, in my opinion, I just think an equivalent U.S. film has a much bigger budget than an equivalent Canadian film. And
Right.
so they either have better cast because they can make bigger offers. They have more shooting days. They have more cameras. It just in general, there's obviously exceptions to what I'm saying, and this is just my opinion based on what I've seen over the years. But I have a friend who's a line producer in Vancouver, and last year he line produced a $10 million Netflix MOW, like an MOW with no names in it whatsoever for Netflix. A couple soap opera actors, stars, and I just thought that was insane. 10 million
Mhm.
US, and feature film in Canada. It's like if you got 5 or 6 million, people are saying that's big budget. So it's
Yeah.
just like it's just it's just a different thing. And like that movie is going to the festivals, but technically is going to a market,
Yeah.
try and sell after the festivals. And it's just, a lot of the time it gets lost
Yeah.
in it because it's just not quite competitive in my opinion. And the solution, aside from like we need more money, Not, not quite too sure. But I mean, the other thing about LA, a lot of this is relationships. So if you live down there and you're down there, you're building friendships and strong relationships that with sort of like the people that made those decisions that you don't quite build as much up here.
Right.
Especially once you start getting past like bigger budgets and genre movies and all that kind of stuff, it's like I think that's another thing that's different. So
Yeah, and Canada doesn't seem to really be like we live in Vancouver, obviously. So a lot of the bigger decisions and all the distributors are all in Toronto. So that's one, for our purposes, for the purposes of making those connections, you're sort of already across the coast from where you probably want to be for to have those daily connections that you might want.
no, I yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people in Toronto. I've over the years, I lived there for a while, so I have the relationships. But it's like when a new distributor shows up and you don't know them because you live in Vancouver, you don't see them at functions in Toronto all the time and stuff like that. So you can't develop that relationship. Even me trying to like cold message or trying to reach out to somebody I don't know, like it's a struggle to try and
Mhm.
develop that relationship. And then it's like, okay, meet me at TIFF or meet me here. Like I want to like build that relationship. I just that's probably the most important thing for a filmmaker to try and get that Canadian distributor on your film. It's like, you have to have that relationship, or you need the executive producer that has the relationship to introduce the project.
Mhm.
I think it's an uphill battle if you're just if they don't know who you are, just hey, here's my project. I mean, it's a long shot for them to get involved. My
Right.
without that relationship. So
For any like independent filmmaker, like obviously like we all fall into that category. Even Remnant, which of course Ken and you worked on, without getting into the anything confidential. What gets a project like Remnant off the ground? What makes that different than anything else that is out there? Like with the same project, but it doesn't work out.
I mean, that film was not financed through the traditional Canadian system,
Right.
right? So that one was, you know, done privately, right? And so that in itself just gave it such opportunity. Like it almost felt like more like an American style um, American style financing structure, which you do not see a lot in Canada. Very rarely. I've only seen it a few times. Very difficult to get at, but it gives you, you can move quickly when you actually just have a bunch of money to make your
Right.
movie and you control it roughly. And you don't have to worry about applications and this and that. And you can just go and I can make an offer. And I actually have, I can go make an offer to a star and I know that I'm financed. A lot of times my experience, you're making an offer and you're not really financed, right?
Right.
And you're sort of saying you're financed, but you're not really financed and you're playing that game, which I hate.
But
And
it's also because their name is going to get you the financing, or you're hoping there.
so and then what are your sales estimates? Well, it's based on these names, but I don't have any of these names yet. So you got to go try and get the name. And then you're dealing with like the LA agents, which also falls into the thing about relationships, living in LA, forming relationships with agents and managers of cast. More of the meaningful cast for features, at least, is down there. And so there's just a lot more opportunity to do that. But anyways, going back to Remnant, you know, the doors just open. They could just go and make moves that you couldn't necessarily make at the speed because they already had everything already in place from the financing. It was like they had the financing, then they had to go try and get everything. It's
Yeah.
usually you're trying to get everything to get the financing. So it's like a reverse thing in the independent Canadian film that's traditional way of going about.
Where the private equity is, or like the people who are financing the film are kind of financing the project, and the director and slash producer, the creative team, that's what they're financing, and then they're
Yeah.
counting on them to go and do the right thing by
Yeah.
it.
Or it's like they're trying to, it still happens nowadays. Like, oh, let's get a couple of cast attached and go get the sales agent to make pre-sales to try and finance the movie. So you're not even financed at one of the markets. Um, that's a lot of time and effort, and there's no guarantee that films even get made. And you're putting all this time and effort into it to try and put it to package it and get these pieces. And the biggest, most important piece is your money. You don't have it yet. Versus Remnant had the opposite, and it was just like a breath of fresh air. Like the most important problem had been solved, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And it just made for, much more smoother sailing, just moving it forward. And it went really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a really great experience. I wish they were all like that. I was jealous. I was like, oh my God, you guys don't know how difficult it can be when you don't have your finance and you're trying to put everything together.
The difficult part is basically trying to get like that distribution, the sales estimates, like the pre-sales, all that other, and obviously telefilm, if you've even gotten that far with them, but get it and the broadcaster licensing and all that other stuff, because that's what's holding it back, right?
You're trying to convince people that will give you money that this film has merit, this film has worth. Why should they get involved in this? You're wanting them to be involved because you need them. Without the telefilms even like the Canadian distributor at the national level, you need the distributor before you can even get telefilm. So you got to like try and convince. And there's only like 5 or 6 of them distributors in Canada that qualify you truly. You're trying to convince them. Then you're trying to convince telefilm. It takes months and months and years to do this. That's to get them to give you the money versus you have the money and you don't need to convince anybody. Distributor, you're not interested? Doesn't matter. One of them will be, or we'll get them later, or we'll just get them later. Because the film will be finished and we'll get them later. So I don't, definitely it's a great movie. Ken is an amazing director and great team. And it was a great, I was lucky actually to be involved in it. So
that's the thing. It seems like what you're saying, like this is far more when I've looked into the American model of financing independent films, that's far more where they go with it. It's like they got, the private equity is the first place to go. And then you use that to attach the actors and the right people that then maybe attracts the distributor. But even if you don't, you've still got, once you get it to market or festivals or things like that, that's when you can pick up your distributor because that doesn't really even affect the timing of paying back the equity because you'd still have to wait for the festival and the money to come in anyway, like the receipts to come in.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the end, there's always I don't know, it's not necessarily an elephant in the room. It's just the truth of, which is why it's difficult to get private money, which is why probably a lot of this funding exists in Canada and other countries outside of the US, especially to fund more festival art house type movies, which, they're great. And there's definitely a cultural aspect to them, telling those sorts of stories that a lot of people love. But, most movies don't make their money back. It's just the way it is. They're expensive to make. And you kind of don't know what you have until you have the film finished.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if you have a good movie until it's done. You can kind of tell as you're shooting. Performances are great. This is great. You got a star in your film or an actor that sort of hitting those estimates or whatever, or genre that sells most of the time. It sells half decently, but you kind of don't know. It's done, and then it's starts to be sold. Unless it's a studio film and it already has everything up front. But as an independent movie, you kind of don't know until it's finished, and that's the risk. And you can make a $10 million movie that makes a bunch of money, or $2 million movie like an Obsession or something like that, which is that's a rare thing. But a lot of times you can make a $10 million movie that makes 3 for sales, and you're told that that's a success. So by a sales agent. And you just kind of don't know until they actually start selling. And there's lots of excuses why. The market changes, this, that, there's political things, everything can affect anything. And so that's why it's difficult to find private money in movies, because it's not as a one-off film. It's there's a bit of a roll the dice sort of scenario there.
Yeah.
That there's got to be more than just financial incentive to be involved in it, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and it's that, whatever you want to call it, the executive producer credit, if you want to call it, isn't enough. But you got to have like a love for making movies, just like the reason that you're doing it, the reason that I'm doing it is, but having then a way to contribute that is that you don't have to necessarily be a director or a writer to be involved in the film industry if you have capital, if you have that but if you have capital and a love for making films, private equity can be involved, and maybe it isn't. There's some financial reward if you do it enough. Maybe there's like you just need one out of every 10 to hit before you make something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at a lot of the US films, there's a lot more genre, there's a lot more, the budgets are probably bigger, but there's more names. And what is a name versus not a name that, everybody's got an opinion, and, sales agents will say all different things. Everybody's got their own lists of who has value and what that value means for budget levels. Um, but in general, it's kind of like there's more recognizable talent in those American films than outside of America. And a lot of the films that are made in Canada or other countries are much more sort of like festival-y films, because the funding system in each of these countries, return of investment is not necessarily a priority. So, getting into some good festivals and getting, advancing the career of an up and coming director, filmmaking team, that's important. You're going to make a $3 million movie that would never get made in this, like, independently in the States. They would never fund this with actors that nobody recognizes, but it's done like that. So,
and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Like we do need more, creative chances in art films, and like more, dramatic storytelling and drama and trauma and all the other things that kind of come out of making more art films. But there is that, like the movies I see over and over again are the genre films. Like they're always these films that you leave the theater or you leave the experience feeling like, oh, that was a lot of fun. I would do that again. I would watch that movie again.
yeah.
And, Canada, I find, maybe this is the optimist in me, it feels like that's an untapped market. I don't think we have fully hit our stride yet in that world. And even just looking at, having talked with Ken, even before the movie got fully financed, it's that idea that like that's a really well developed script, first of all. Like that, I think probably was number one that helps make the good film. And Ken obviously is very, he might be new, but he's also studied film, being in the film industry for over a decade. So, and he's been directing and writing ever since. So he's not coming out of it like 2 years in the film industry and suddenly trying to hit a breakthrough hit. Like he's worked at it. He's honed his skills, but also honed his experience to the point where he knows what makes a good movie.
He's got such talent. So he definitely wasn't like a sudden newbie that just handed this movie opportunity. He's been around for a while and really worked at it, and absolutely deserved that chance. This is his chance, right? Which I think is going to work out very well. Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity, untapped opportunity, but I just think that there needs to be a little bit of a push somehow, some way to, it goes back into the financing thing. If there's an opportunity to like try and bring financing in Canada to this industry outside of the traditional funding system, you're going to need to give it a reason to come. Knowing the risk involved in film, aside from the tax credits, like, just off the top of my head, some sort of investor being able to write off the investment or some tax credit for actual private investment in film or something like that. Like you're gonna have to give, in my opinion, incentives beyond the tax credits and that sort of money, the telephone money and all that sort of stuff. There's always going to be one-off scenarios where people take a chance, but as a career, as an industry, I think it'll be a very difficult thing to, outside of Hollywood again, within Canada, to incentivize private investment. It's just funny. Friends, family, people that I know that have done well in business, for example, in different industries, not in film, they always ask me what it's like to be in the film industry and this and that. And I make a joke and I say, oh yeah, are you ready to invest? And they look at me and they laugh and they say, not in your lifetime. There's no way. That's why I'm successful. So, it would be good to have a system here where they would actually want to invest. Knowing the industry, there'd have to be some sort of incentive for them to do that.
There's a de-risking part of it because like tax credits help on the opposite side of the ledger, so to speak, because they make it so that you can make a film that you only need 2 million to make a $3 million movie. You only need, it's not like it's actually giving them the extra incentive. It's just making it so that their investment can go towards making a bigger film because the tax credits can help on that side of it. And the same thing, telefilm can fund the film so that you need less private equity, but doesn't mean that the private equity isn't still at risk. Like the film, it still needs to be effectively generating revenue in order for it to be something for an investor.
I mean, I kind of look at it more like they're just grants that come at the end of the movie once you've finished and delivered it. I'm sure the complicated structures somehow have to do with taxes for people and for labor and all that sort of stuff. But it's roughly 35% of a budget. So you make a $10 million movie and you're at $7 million at risk. If you can get telefilm, then you cut that down, but there's always going to be a portion that's a gap in there. And telefilm is not necessarily funding the kind of movies that investors would want to fund. This is going to make these kind of sales, genre movies and all that kind of stuff. Right now their priorities are different. And so I would think that private investor would probably be more like, how am I going to get my money back? And you got to show it to them and explain it to them. There's always a risk. There's no guarantee, but it's like you're confident because of reasons. And the genre film itself is a bit of a mitigation against those risks because genre sells much better than a drama. And again, going back, I just, it would be great if there was the government or whatever changed the tax structure somehow or did something to incentivize private investment in the industry here. But I don't think that that's a priority. They're going to be building data centers or something.
Yeah, exactly. Pipelines, data centers, and all those things. But it's not a film project. And when you're in the business, that is the place you want these things to exist. Because, like you said, if you invested into a pipeline, for example, or any kind of resource sector, you can get a tax write-off or tax break for that investment because there's also that assumption that resource-based investing has a very long timeline to it. Like if you invest in a copper mine, you're investing in something that's not going to pay off for 10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, thinking about it, it's like, okay, a one-off movie, independent feature film. Like if you look at it like, oh, I'm going to invest in a speculative gold mine. There may not be a gold there. There may be gold there. It's going to take years of whatever they do to get that mine going or even just figure out if they actually have a good deposit. And that's a risk. You may not get any of that back. But I guess the difference, now that I'm thinking about it, this is just completely off the cuff. The difference is that if there is gold there, aside from how much, you know what the price of gold is at, or what it can sell for. So they kind of can formulate what the revenue could be early on. Like, oh, the deposit could be this much, and gold prices are here. The gold prices can fluctuate, but it's like, versus you're going to make a movie, you're sort of mixing that business with creativity. What people think is good is all subjective. 100 different people look at the same movie and they all have 100 different opinions, and some people may love it, some people may hate it. And you just and you don't even know what that end result's going to be. And that's, I think, the big difference. Again, why there's like a lot of people that are putting money into speculative mining operations and stuff, but those same people would never put that same money into a speculative movie because there's even more risk with the movie because of all the subjectivity of what is value and that creative subjectivity from what is deemed as value at the end result of the film is too much risk.
Yeah, if you kind of like quantify it a bit, it's like what you're saying in terms of like, if you find gold, you know what the value of the gold is. And then it's just a matter of how much gold do you find. If we translate that to a film, not necessarily even the actor, because, casting an actor now, who knows what their value is 2 years from now when the movie actually hits the market. Could be that you're catching someone at the beginning of their career. Could also be someone that you've caught at the pinnacle, and then 2 years from now they're nothing. Like they're not someone who matters to anybody or matters less, or the value has gone down. So it might have been something, but it's not anything anymore. So now you're relying on, okay, well, now we're looking at a 90s star who basically their value right now is pretty set. it's not going to go up or down, but it's also not that high, and kind of trying to quantify the value of the film based on the aggregate of the stars that you put into it, of the people that you put into it, and then hoping there's a quality product at the end of it as well, because obviously that in and of itself will do some of the heavy lifting for you. But that's the X factor too, because you can have very good directors who make a crappy film, and vice versa. You can have director who just hits lightning in a bottle with the film that they make. They bring in the right people. They get a really good cinematographer who shoots it well. It gets edited well, and the person that they have at the lead, just knocks it out of the park. And that's your gold, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, man. I don't know. It's a tough industry we're in, man.
It is. Why?
Why are we still doing it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because I love storytelling. I love stories, and I don't know what else I would do with my life. I know enough about this that I'm pretty good at it, and that's just also why I'm sort of talking to filmmakers when I meet them about more executive producing stuff than trying to be the lead producer on something anymore. Because I've gone through it. I've gone through the fire a number of times, and I won't get specific because here, this movie, actually Remnant, was like the first movie that I've been involved in where it was like, there's always a few bumps in the road, but it was like, it's a great experience. Everything was a great experience. A lot of the movies that I produced, they were really tough. There was a lot of crazy stuff that happened. And I remember even calling other producers that I know when things were happening to me. I'm like, this just happened. Like, what do I do? And I remember a very seasoned producer once saying, I've never had that happen to me before. That is crazy. And I'm like, great. So you can't help me. I don't know what to do in this moment. I'm like, and then like every film I made was like, there was something else that was like, no one's ever experienced this before.
It's almost like part of that adventure, the unknown of like starting a film project and just doing the work to see if it actually will all come together, is almost like that's the adventure itself. Like making something good,
Yeah.
you want to make something good and fun and a fun film to watch, but ultimately in the end, this is a lot of work putting it together, and it's a bit of an adventure making a film.
It's definitely an adventure. I think there's definitely something to be said, that feeling of knowing that it was so difficult to make. And now that it's finished and you see it at a festival or you see it at your premiere or whatever, there's definitely a lot, for me at least, there's, a lot of pride that goes into it, that you're the main lead producer. You might have some partners, but you made this. And it's so difficult to make an independent feature film in itself that it's definitely something to be proud of. And that's a great feeling. And that's kind of why you're brought back into it. And hopefully the next one's not as difficult as this one. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's even harder. Especially if the budgets go up and the days get longer and there's bigger stars, and that all breeds more complications.
Mm-hmm.
Or complicated shooting scenes with stunts and action and whatever. It just becomes even more complicated. But then that's where it's also more fun.
What's a movie you haven't made yet that you'd love to make, or this type of movie?
I would love, and I've been trying to find a script, and I've been trying to find a really cool gangster film that's fresh and unique and different. And haven't found one quite yet. Maybe something that's sort of Canadian, that sort of taps into, I'm developing a TV series that, which is totally different. I've been dipping my toe into developing some TV shows, and I have a series that sort of taps into that world. That's really exciting and interesting. But as a feature, kind of like looking for, or like a really good thriller that is just twisty and keeps you on the edge of your feet, and you don't see it coming. It's like, being in it so long, it's kind of like you start reading something and you can kind of guess what the whole story is.
Right.
It's sort of everything is cliched and everything's been done and nothing is fresh anymore. So it's like trying to find something that you really didn't see coming is difficult. But if it happens, it's like, oh my God. Like, now I'm interested and excited about this because I've never seen this before. So kind of love to try and find something like that.
There you go. There you go.
Right.
And I haven't seen any of those two things in Canada either. So there's like a mine of opportunity there for storytelling because like I haven't seen any Canadian gangster films.
Yeah,
There must be one.
like I would, not that it's not really the comparable. I'd love to produce a Canadian version of City of God, something like that. Like not that specific story, but just something that's like something in that world that people haven't seen before, but it's true to Canada. Really gritty and like impactful. And like you're just like, what? You're blown away by it. Kind of a thing. It is a trying to find a comparable that might. That's the first thing that came to mind. Or like a Gamora or something like that. I know they did this series, but the feature came out first out of Italy. That was really, or like a Canadian version of what's the Australian gangster film? They made the TV series based on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It just flew out of my head, man. I was just like, it was what the hell? With Ellen Barkin was in the TV show. I got an IMDb it on my phone. It's going to drive me nuts. Animal Kingdom. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
based on the Australian film, great film, Animal Kingdom. Like I'd love to make a Canadian Animal Kingdom. Not the same story, obviously, but like something. There might,
The vibe, the idea.
true story that's just like the crazy, crazy Canadian gangster film. I just don't think the funding would. I just don't think that they would support it.
We just need the mob to fund it.
I don't think they would. But anyways, but if I found something like that, I would definitely put my time into it and try. And I haven't found something like that. So, um, yeah, something, yeah, that's sort of like what I would be excited about.
I think we've definitely gone over the time I promised you. So,
Okay.
the I guess last question is sort of any advice you'd give to an up and coming producer in Canada? Don't other than don't do it.
No, I wouldn't say don't do it. I mean, it's you just kind of like know what you're getting into. I would just follow your passion, your interest about a story, um, and sort of like go from there. Um, I would definitely make a short film as a producer. Like I met somebody who was interested in producing in Vancouver. They weren't in the industry whatsoever, and I told them, I'm like, yeah, go produce a short film. Number one, and see if you actually like it as a producer. Like Go, it's not quite the same, but it definitely is a bit of a litmus test for that world. And if you're not experienced, if you're not a crew person that's worked, in crew, whether you're in the office or on set in one of the departments, and then you want to get more into producing and you have that experience in the industry already. If you're like somebody that, no matter what, I would still be like, produce a short or two and really get that experience with what it means to actually be a producer.
Yeah.
And have that responsibility in all aspects, from the money to the budget. In the end, it's sort of like you have your production managers and your line producers and all your keys, but the sort of the buck kind of stops with you as the producer with almost everything. That's not creative, even creative sometimes. If things kind of go off the rails with stuff, but the kind of like if they can't solve the problems, if the department heads or whoever, if they can't solve the problems, eventually, I remember they come to you. I remember on Island, I was in the office and there was an issue on set, and you went on your mic, you're like, "Yeah, we need a producer to come to set." And I was just like, okay, there's a problem that nobody else can deal with that I know. Only I can now deal with this problem. I won't talk about what it was, but you kind of don't know if you want to be a producer until you've sort of experienced those moments and dealt with those moments to know if you want to be, a producer in this country or just in the independent world, film world.
I often think of that as like the producer it never has the easy decision. There's never like, if it was an easy decision, then the producer wouldn't be the one dealing with it. It's like you're there as that last line of like, okay, the only way that this problem can get resolved is if someone like me who has seen at least enough of this to know what at least I'm doing as I step forward to solve the problem.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, if it could be solved easily, then that department head or whatever problem in that sort of falls in that department, they'll deal with it. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, we're over budget in our department and we need this. And now we're going to go over budget and here, are you okay with it? And it's
Yeah.
almost like the line producer was like, you make that choice because now it's, something like that. Or there's other things. Yeah, other issues with civilian people and that you're shooting, and there's an issue, they have to deal with somebody that's causing a problem or whatever that's not in your crew, that you then now have to go and manage it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest advice. I'd be like, go make a couple short films and see how you feel about it. And then if you still love it, then then try and go into the feature film side and find a script that you connect with. Hopefully you're in the industry and have friends and relationships where somebody's a writer and they come to you with a script that you kind of gravitate towards and sort of go from there.
I always think too, like one of the biggest lessons that I have learned is that it's important to find people to work with who you can work with. The script itself is one thing in finding good stories, but it's like if you can't work together with partners or crews or things like that, then filmmaking is such a collaborative art form. It requires people who know how to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Remnant, Ken has been in the industry for many years. He worked on a number of TV shows, as a director's assistant or in story department, or they just had a lot of experience and they had a lot of relationships, like positive relationships with people. So when it came down to his first film, he was able to make some calls and get some favors, and they actually came. I know I have some filmmakers who would say that they could get the favors and they couldn't get the favors. People, they weren't willing to give them the favors for various reasons. And this, Ken, you're able to, those relationships are important, especially with your first film, and pushing it forward. And, even nowadays, it's like my relationships are almost like some of the most important aspects of getting a project off the ground are your strong relationships with people. So yeah, building those relationships, is important as well. Once you're able to decipher if you really want to jump into this crazy world, and do that. And, if you make those shorts, it's like you then hopefully get into some festivals. Then you go to these festivals and you meet people. You also meet the funders. You'll meet people from Telefilm. They go to these the bigger ones. They go to the festivals. You'll meet people, and then you just you formulate those relationships, and that leads to you then building that, and then going on to your first film and going from there. So,
and you learn to identify like what films are. Again, it's all very subjective, but what films are good? Identify good projects right from the start. Like you're saying, like reading a script and knowing whether it's going to be good or bad, or having some kind of taste in it.
Yeah, or even knowing how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, that's another one thing too. Yeah,
to make, it's a great film, but this is like $100 million. So, there's no point. Good luck with that. But you at least get a sense of that from a cost perspective as well. So
yeah, cool,
man.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt. This is great. I appreciate your time.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.